Welcome to the Veritas Forum, engaging university students and faculty in discussions about life's hardest questions and the relevance of Jesus Christ to all of life.
What's up? Thanks to all the organizers for all the support they've done. It's pretty amazing. For the Veritas Forum for taking care of all this. Especially thankful for Professor Dean Chatterjee for just sharing the stage with me. I'm looking forward to, we had a great dinner, looking forward to just talking more. My friends, today I think we're here to struggle with big questions. I hope this is what you think college is about. You know, it's not about doing integrals, doing word problems, chemistry experiments, writing sets. It's about asking really hard questions. Questions like, what is truth? Is there a God? What is real? And to me, most importantly, why are Ugg boots so popular? I don't get it. Anyway. Now, each one of us has our own perspective. You see, that's the problem, right? We all have our own perspective, our own worldview on what's right, but what does it mean to talk about capital T, capital R for reality? You know, is there something universal out there? You know, there's lots of different kinds of truths, right? There's personal truths. Let me just give you an example of what I mean by that. Little Mermaid. Many of you know this Disney movie. Maybe you watched it as a kid. Maybe continue to watch it now. It's a story, as some would say, about love and adventure, about a young girl finding who she is in this world. But I would actually think it's a work of Satan. It's one of the most evil movies ever made, and I'll tell you why. Think of it from my perspective. Her dad adores her. She is the princess of the ocean. She can have anything she wants. Her dad says, "My darling Ariel, whatever you want to do. The ocean is yours. Explore it. You have little fuzzy friends around you, floating around you. They love you, right? Tons of people adore you, will protect you. Could you just please do one thing? Just the humans, we just don't understand them that well. You know, try to stay away from them if you can." And Ariel looks at her dad and says, "Screw you. I saw this guy for about 5 seconds. He's the one. I know it." And she gives up everything she has for this guy. Now, why would I want my daughter to watch this thing? Anyway, so we have different ideas of what it means to be truth. There's personal truths, you know, truth for you, truth for me. Maybe it's different. There's mathematical truths. Here's the Gauss-Bonnet theorem. Absolutely. Some of you guys are getting a little turned on by this. I understand. I can relate. Let's see what this says. It says that the integral of the curvature of every point on a surface, if you add it up, integral just means add up, is actually equal to 2 pi times the Euler characteristic of the surface. No matter what you do to that surface, how you pull it or stretch it, it's always a fixed constant how the curvature is changing. It's great. But most of you, when you read this thing, agree with Stephen Colbert when he says equations are the devil's sentences. So is there a mathematical truth? You know, what does it mean if I put up the Gauss-Bonnet theorem for you and me? You know, nowadays there's even radical notions of what it even means to be real, or the concept of reality. Here's a quote from a recent book by Stephen Hawking, the great string theorist and physicist. Here's what he writes in his book, The Grand Design. He writes, "The universe does not have a single existence or history, but rather every possible version of the universe exists simultaneously." What he means by that is, it's not just that this is reality, but every possible thing that you could do or you could have done or you're going to do is also real, and it's happening now at the same time. All of those are realities. Maybe something like that. The multiple universe theory, the multiverse theory is needed to understand how gravitational forces work with quantum mechanics, with string theoretic ideas. Maybe that's what reality is about. Maybe we don't even have a clue what it is. In 21st century America, I think the truths that seem most valued today are scientific ones. Not the ones in the language of God or church or religion or scripture. Those don't seem to matter that much nowadays in the world we live in America. It seems like science tells us what the right thing to do is. And let me tell you what science is from my perspective. It's a toolkit. It's designed to measure data that we see, empirical data. Things you see, you touch, you observe, you measure. This is the new reality, how to measure this, and that's what science is about. In fact, unfortunately, it seems like science is the only reality out there. That's the only thing that can tell us what's right. Religion, faith, hey, that's great, but it's a scaffolding for those who need it. If you need to believe in a God, hey, good for you. That's awesome. If you need him, that's great. If you need that little crutch to make you walk, that's great. I don't. I believe in science. That's strong enough to hold me up. Maybe it's just a scaffolding for those that are weak. This is what this kind of an idea of a mindset said. Let me give you a quote. Great physicist Michio Kaku. This is a reforming of the quote by Arthur C. Clarke, and here's what he writes. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from divinity. Basically, what you have is that in science, if you go long enough, it'll figure out every kind of question you have. You have questions about spirituality, about how your mind works, how you think. Don't worry about it. Give us 100 years. Give us 200 years. We'll figure it all out. It's just the fact you don't really get it yet. Divinity is a fluff, a crutch that you need to make up stuff. How did we get this way? Black is the new white. Science is the new God. When did this happen? Was it always like this? Let me explain. There's too much. Let me sum up. The Renaissance era was a time when art, music, science, literature, faith, reason, beauty, all hung out together. Right? They were all one thing. Paintings, poems, cathedrals, all of these things blended the ideas together. If you look at Leonardo da Vinci, was he a scientist? Absolutely. Did he care about botany? Did he care about flowers? Did he care about the body, how it worked? Absolutely. Was he an engineer? Exactly. Was he an artist? Yes. He was everything. You didn't partition him into pieces. But then after the Renaissance era, the Enlightenment era followed in the 1750s. The Enlightenment era said this: science needs to be advocated as the primary source of authority. Ideas must be tested. Ideas must be measured. Ideas must be evaluated. My friends, I am a huge fan of the Enlightenment era. You know why? It's given me a job, right? That's what I do. I test, evaluate things. It's given us great things like cars. It's given us vaccines. It's given us amazing Oreos, not just normal ones. This is what the Enlightenment era does. It gives us, pushes us. It says, you just can't say the sun is in the center of our solar system. You have to prove it. Convince me. Use arguments. It is a great thing. But unfortunately, the Enlightenment era has been taken to an extreme setting. Let me give you a simple example. Here are a couple of things that fit together. Math and art fit together in the Renaissance era. Faith and reason fit together. Religion and politics, supernatural and natural. Let me just go back and explain this religion and politics business for a second. Religion, to me, we're all religious people. I don't care whether you believe in a God or not believe in a God. It is an answer that you have to the questions of the big things of this world. Where are we? What's the purpose of life? What is morality? All these, we all have our own answers to it, so we're all religious. The way we answer those questions is our religion. Politics is how we interact with one another. Based on those beliefs, what do you think divorce law should be like? What do you think a speeding ticket should cost? All of those things of our big questions translate into how we handle our interactions with one another. So they do fit together. But unfortunately now, the Enlightenment has actually stripped it apart, not only made it one separate from the other, but it's actually against. On one side, you have this amazingly cool, nerdy math major, and then you have this fluffy art major. Don't even think about putting religion and politics together. They're actually opposite things. They don't fit together. Natural and supernatural. Keep it separate. They don't belong. My friends, the Enlightenment is trying to clean up, organize, and that's good, but also remove the mess of life. See, this is the problem because I think the mess of life is fantastic. Let me give you some examples. Let me give you something that is messy and absolutely fantastic. Ice cream. Not just ice cream. This is ice cream from Cincinnati, Ohio. Grader's ice cream. That's black raspberry chip. Exactly. And the chocolate is so amazing. It is not hard when you bite it. It melts in your mouth. If you don't believe there's a God, eat it. Trust me, you'll realize what it is. You see, to me, this ice cream is more than some signals sent to my brain. It's more than chemistry of the chocolate melting deliciously in my mouth. It's more than nutrients in my body. It is messy, but yet it's bigger than that. Have you ever noticed that because of the Enlightenment, we actually don't eat food anymore? We eat nutrition labels. We've broken things into so many pieces that we don't suck it up. Let me give you something else that's messy, but fantastic. Women. Relationships. I got some friends who can vouch for me on this. Relationships, love, dating, marriage, sex, all of this stuff put together. It's messy business. Instead of me talking about things in general, let me give you a particular example. Let me tell you about my woman, my family. All right, here we go. Yeah, exactly. You say that now. Let me tell you the stories, all right? So there I am. There's my wife, Queen of the Universe, next to me. If you notice, we don't look alike. She's Chinese. She was born in the States, but her parents grew up in China. She has Asian heritage in that sense. We got married. The number one thing my wife will tell you if you ask her for marriage advice is, marry within your race. Exactly right. Why? Because marriage is so hard as it is. It's hard to put up with another guy from a completely different planet. Marriage is messy. And then, whoa, you think that's interesting. Then you have the two things on the left and the one on the right, two on the right, one on the left. The three piglets that we had. Those guys, their life's confused, right? They're like this cross-gen, growing up in America. Who am I? They're messed up. And to throw it into the mix, you have this little one. We just adopted this angel just about a year ago, and we had her since she was born, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. You think my other kids are messed up. She's gone. You see, life is filled with pain and mess, but my family, it is glorious. It is joy-filled. It is awesome. See, whatever meaning and truth with a capital T, reality with a capital R, there is, I need it to be grounded in the everyday mess of reality. That's what I have to do. You just cannot talk about abstract notions. Bring it down to earth to me. This reality that we are going to define, whether your own reality or my reality, whatever it is, must deal with food, must deal with music, must deal with art, justice, sex, pain. It must handle these issues. But today, the Enlightenment mindset is asked to deal with issues it was not designed for. It was designed to measure things that exist in this world, but there are things that are bigger than that. There are things that are supposed to be messy and stay messy. I think we are holding so tightly to this Enlightenment model that it's not designed to handle all the stuff we want it to. Let me give you a quote from Stephen Hawking from the same book I talked about earlier. He talks about this for physical models, for models about atoms and string theories. He says, when a model is found lacking, a common reaction is to say the experiment was wrong. If that doesn't prove to be the case, people still often don't abandon the model, but instead attempt to save it through modifications. I think what he talks about can be used for the Enlightenment. We still try to hold on to this thing instead of trying to give a new meaning of reality. We still hold on and say science can do everything for us. And I think it gets dangerous when we do that. The model is broken. What I believe we need is a new model. Now, I am not advocating throwing Enlightenment away. I'm not saying throw science away. Of course not. I'm a scientist. That's what my life's about. I think we should take the Enlightenment model and expand on it. Now, I'm not saying expand on it and just add God to it, tag it along, because that's going to solve things. Just artificially believe in a God, because you know what? That might solve your problems. I'd far be it me to say that. I'd much rather be an atheist and be a clean person who understands science than artificially put a God on that I'm just making up myself. In my personal search, there's only one place. I've found a place that actually makes sense, that handles the big questions, and is grounded in things that I actually understand. As a scientist trained in logic, that's the Christian faith. And I just want to tell you why I find it so attractive. To me, the Christian faith has several similarities, numerous similarities to other great faiths of this world. Absolutely true. There are a lot of wonderful faiths of this world. It has a lot of similarities to it. But my friends, it is the differences that make the Christian faith sexy to me. So let me just close with a couple of things. Let me tell you these differences. First, the Christian faith is truth that is grounded in history. It is not some perfect golden tablets of visions coming down, but it's somehow God interacting with history, God raising his arms, getting dirty with the muck, not just giving us perfect truths, but getting himself involved in history. Now here's the problem with history. It's messy. There are lots of different perspectives. Who's saying what when? When did it happen? Are you sure? Because this guy's saying it differently. Were you there? History is messy, but we have tools to measure it. We have scientific tools to measure scientific data, and we are smart people. We have historical tools to measure historical data. Let's use those tools. The Bible is a record of God's interaction over those years. Let's see if history holds it up. The Christian faith says, from a historical perspective, the climax of the world happened 2,000 years ago. The life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. That is the historical event of the Christian faith. That is the claim. You take that claim away, you have no Christian faith. It is a historical claim. It is not personal, it is not mathematical, but it is historical. It's not scientific. You can't repeat that experiment. You can't repeat the experiment about Abraham Lincoln dying and living, but you can use historical tools to measure whether that happened. Second, I'm attracted to the Christian faith in how the truth is revealed. It is not blind allegiance. God does not say, obey me because I have absolute power. Bend your knee to me because I'm the God of the universe. The Christian faith is just the opposite. The God of the universe bends his knee to you. This is the most amazing thing. On the cross, the Lord of the universe says, I will do anything for you. I will give up my power for you. Wow, I'm attracted to how that truth is revealed. The heart of the Christian faith is this. There is a God who died for his enemies and prayed for their forgiveness. Unbelievable. And the goal of the Christian is to imitate this God. This faith, more than any, shows tolerance in a pluralistic world. And finally, to me, the Christian faith provides restoration of this world. You see, my friends, I am not willing to agree with Bertrand Russell, who wants to escape this world in mathematical abstract truths. That's not what I want. I don't want to live in enlightenment dreams that science cleans everything up for me. I don't want to escape the world. The world's too beautiful. I love this world. I love the mess of this world. But at the same time, I will not accept the world the way it is. I'm not willing to put up with the injustice and the pain and the suffering that happens. The world is broken. I cannot simply say the Jedi and the Sith have to hang out. The good and the bad have to be together. No. There's something that's bad that should be put down. Injustice must be dealt with. And the Christian faith offers a restoration of this world, not throwing it away, but restoring it. Jesus, as he was restored in the resurrection, for the Easter coming up pretty soon, the claim of the Christian faith is the world itself will be restored just like that. Pain and justice will be given a solution here. Let me just close with this. Think deeply about deep issues. These are hard things to think about. I just want you, I challenge you, and I think Professor Chatterjee will agree with me. Think deeply about these big things. Get messy. Let me close with one of my favorite quotes ever. Princess Bride. Life is pain. Anyone that says different is selling something. Thanks, my friends.
It's an honor to be here, and I'm grateful to get the chance to speak a few words in response or as a contrast to our renowned Christian speaker. I thank first the Veritas Forum for doing this. A forum like that is so needed on a campus like this. We need to have all perspectives, then we should draw our own conclusion. And I'm also very proud and honored to be on the same podium with Professor Satyam Devadas, such a well-known, famous scholar and a Christian believer at that. Now, my talk is going to be extremely boring. Nothing like that lively talk that we heard from Satyam just now. But please bear with me, because sometimes maybe you can find some truth in something that is boring. Okay, so I will try my best. Now, I am not convinced by the substance of what Professor Devadas said here. I'm not convinced at all. It leaves the whole issue wide open. Life is indeed messy in so many respects. We know that. Life has so many things that we can't explain. Life also has so many moments which are magical, purely blissful. Of course, in all those areas, a rational, scientific mind fails us. We know that. Does it mean that we have to therefore get to God or go to God to make sense of those things? Unless we have good reason to believe in the truth of God's existence. That is, I believe, is the issue today, and we did not hear anything on that from Professor Devadas. It's okay if I call you Satyam?
Anything you want, my friend.
Okay. Now, so that's where I would like to really push the debate into it. Now, this is a big issue. In fact, a rather messy issue, I might say. Given that, I might take a bit of time, perhaps slightly bit longer than the allotted time of maybe 20 minutes or so. So please bear with me, okay? So, there are all types of truths. Saturn mentioned some of them. Personal truth that we hold dear to ourselves. Then we have more universal type of truth, like scientific truth. They hold in this world, all around, logical truth, mathematical truth that he mentioned. Universal truth, what does it mean? Really, I don't know that. Now, if universal truth means that it's possible, it's true in all possible worlds, beyond our actual world, then it's a stretch of imagination. And only some logical type of truth, or like a tautology, that is true in that sense. A tautology is something that can never be false in any possible world. What's a tautology? A tautology is, let me give you an example than giving you a technical definition. If I tell you that it's either raining or not raining, it's always true. But it's true, it's always true in all possible worlds. There is no counter facts in any way that can falsify that statement. Okay, now, we gain universal truth for all possible worlds in this way, but what's the cost, what's the price tag for that? It's a vacuous truth. It doesn't have any substance, precisely for that reason, because it doesn't take any risk. It doesn't fail either, it's always true. If you ask me, how is the weather right now? Is it raining? I said, if I say, well, it's raining or not raining, it doesn't help you too much, does it? Okay, so I'm not going to get into the type of universal truth that may be possible, that may be true in all possible worlds, because we don't even know how many possible worlds are there. I'm concerned about this world, okay, as a humanist. Now, so, how can we know truth at all? That's one of the questions we have been given. Is science the only way? Well, it's one of the ways. Logic is another way. Pure, plain common sense is surely a standard way that we all get to know truth, that we use it on a regular basis. What about faith? Well, I'll get to that. To talk about faith. Now, another question that was asked was, how do we deal with competing truth claims? Is relativism the best response to religious truth? Now, I am absolutely opposed to relativism, and for good reason. Relativism doesn't help us. We get all sorts of truth claims, and all claims is okay on their own, on its own. What good is that? Relativism is not the way to go. I believe in pluralism. And there is a big difference between relativism and pluralism. And if I have time, I'll explain that a bit too. But that's the sort of the way I would like to go. And these were the three questions given to us to start with. Universal truth, how do we know truth at all? And is relativism the only way? So let me get into all that. Now, one of the reasons people say that we should believe in God is because without a belief in God, things are just way too messy, more messy than they usually are. We don't have any morality. God is the basis of morality. Why? God is that sort of an absolute sure foundation we need for morality. Otherwise, anything goes. Standard idea, isn't it? Okay, let me just question that for the time being. What is morality? Let's take a quick look at it. If you don't mind, I'll just have a seat, please. What is morality? Let me tell you basically what morality is. I can't explain though, just give you the rough idea. Morality is based on the idea of rationality. Take away reason, so does go morality. Morality also requires as its necessary ingredient things like autonomy. Unless we have an autonomous human agency based on free will, no morality, then we're moral slaves or robots. Okay. Morality also has to have responsibility. Can you think of morality without responsibility? No. Morality also should have reciprocity, treating others the way you'd like to be treated yourself. So much so that you don't count any more in a special way than anybody else. But you don't count any less than others either. You are one amongst many. That's one thing morality teaches us. That's based on the idea of reciprocity. You might call that the Christian golden rule, whatever, but it's there all over, not just in Christianity. It's called reciprocity. But these are all technical elements. Something else is needed to make morality juicy, to give it more substance. That is compassion, even passion, love, quest for well-being. Those things, they have to be brought in, but not in a way that would violate those other components. If we simply go in a crass utilitarian way to maximize well-being, we can violate people's rights and we can do lots of harm. So there has to be some sort of a balance and fine equilibrium between these two sides. Okay, that's morality basically. Now, these concepts I gave you, they are broad concepts. They're open-ended. That's where their beauty lies. That means so many ways, different people, different cultures in different times, they can interpret those things in their own ways. That means morality is consistent with the diversity. And yet these concepts also have some core meaning, so much so that there is some substance there. That's the beauty of morality. Not anything goes, and yet it can be diverse. Okay, I cannot go any more than that because I have a lot to cover. What is spirituality? People say, wow, you cannot be spiritual without God. You need that, otherwise, again, who knows? Well, what is again spirituality? Let's take a look at that. Spirituality, besides the ingredients of morality, because I cannot think of a spiritual person who is not moral, what else is needed? Well, forgiveness, inner tranquility, compassion, patience, all these spiritual qualities that we find in saintly characters, we call that spirituality. So I gave you certain ingredients of morality and spirituality. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand these things. And surely you don't need to get to God to understand or verify or validate these things. These are our human enterprise. Why do we have to go this way to God and then come that way to our fellow human beings? Why can't you go straight there? I mean, I'm talking with a famous mathematician, a scientist, and also we have the other scientist sitting right over here, Carol. They all know that anything that can explain things in a simplified way and still can give us what we want, that's to be preferred. Better than something that goes about it in a convoluted way based on lots of hypotheses, unprovable, and dogma, and things like that. So that's where I rest that case. Okay, so I didn't even get into the real gist of my talk. That's where I need to get in. Now, so what I'm saying is this. Take a simple case. There are at least 50 major religions in the world, 500 not so major religions in the world, and maybe 5,000 all types of weird beliefs and sects and cults and all that. They all have their idea of God and all that, their idea of what's right, what's wrong, what the way to go, based on God. Now, if we have to go for all of them, because God is needed for morality or spirituality, we are totally lost. It's a chaos. But if we say, no, it's only our religion, our God, that makes sense. That's the basis of morality, not them. How do we show that? By force, by going to war, then we are violating the very precepts of morality and spirituality. So we have to bring in reason to show why something that we hold sacred and moral, that makes sense. Only reason can tell us. If we get into God, then others have their ways to get into God, then we are stuck with that hopeless relativism. Do you see? So again, this is not really the gist of my talk. My talk is religious epistemology, and that's the topic here, which is how do we get to know God? How do we know truth? Okay, so let me get there. My point is this, the broad point, which is this. That our belief in God does not help us in explaining anything in the world, good or bad. And I will give you a glimpse of that, why I say that. But also, does it mean, therefore, belief in God doesn't matter in our life at all? Not at all, I'm not saying that. Belief in God does matter in life, even though it cannot explain anything. How do I combine the two? Well, Satan said that Enlightenment ideas gave us certain very clear-cut ideas. Reason is the way, science is the way, things like that. Faith, oh, that's a messy thing, all that. So there was that opposition between reason and faith. I would like to show how we can bring the two sides together. So I am very much with Satan in this quest for bringing all sides together. But I would like to do in a way that's not based on dogma. That's my approach. Now, of course, we all crave for those good old days when things were all certain in one way or the other. That does not necessarily mean that those things were right or whatever. We all crave for good old days when, for example, Michael Jackson was black, when sex was dirty and air was clean, and all those days. No, point is this, that doesn't take us anywhere. We need reason to sort things out. So let's be right here. Let's be right here with the reason. Okay, so what do we get? Does God exist? I would like to get there. Now, based on what I already told you about why God is not needed or for morality or for spirituality, because we can have morality and spirituality without God. We see examples of that everywhere. You also see examples of people who believe in God. They are neither moral nor spiritual. So those facts go against the idea that we need morality, we need God for morality and spirituality. So that's big enough. That's a forceful argument enough against the idea that we need God for that. But suppose if on top of that we can throw doubt on God's existence, then the whole claim that we need God as the unshakable foundation for morality, that's gone too. The foundation becomes shakeable. I will not do that. I will not go to do that based on dogma. I will not go to say, well, take my word for it, because I am a humanist. Let me try to share some reason with you that perhaps you will find agreeable, acceptable, or at least that will make you think some ways, okay? So, what is it that we have to go for to find out whether God exists or not? Now, we have some standard proofs for God's existence. Again, it's philosophy or philosophy of religion 101. I have been teaching that for this last 40 years or that on this campus, on several other campuses. I'm not going to get into that, not the technicalities of it, but what are basically those arguments. One is what we call the causal argument, that we cannot go on ad infinitum on a causal chain. Something has to start things, you know. Well, even if we agree with that, it's big if though, but even if we do agree to that idea, whatever starts that causal chain, to prove that that's our Christian God, with those three essential attributes of being all-powerful, being all-knowledgeable, being all-knowing, being all-powerful, and being all-good, that is an impossible task. I just leave it at that. So I'm presuming we're talking about a Christian God here because my other illustrious speaker claims to be a Christian believer, because I cannot get into all gods of all religions of the world, no time. Okay, so that's the problem with causal argument. Even if we believe in a cause, how could we show that that's the Christian God? That there could be so many factors that led to that beginning, not just one supreme being like God, okay? It's very hard to do that. Now, there is the argument called ontological argument. I don't have the time to get into that, but something more, a common argument to get into, that's called argument by design, or argument from design, called the teleological argument, telos, meaning a certain end, direction. The idea is this, that you have to believe in God. Why? Because, don't take my word for it, just look around. If you look around, what do you find? You find that, wow, things are they all fit together, you know. The sun rises, the moon goes down, the flower blooms, you know, we are babies, then we get old. There is an order in this world. It's a grand, big machine, almost like a machine. Everything is fitting together. It's like a machine. Now, it's a big job for anybody to prove that the world is like a machine. Again, I don't have the time to get into that to show the problem of analogy argument to make that point. But let's presume that the world is a machine. That doesn't prove that there has to be a God who is the creator, who is the mechanic, who built that machine. Again, the question is, even if we believe that there was a mechanic, what guarantees there that that is a Christian God of that character? It could be a whole bunch of folks together as a team of mechanics that did this thing. And maybe they're still learning as they are trying to perfect things, okay? Now, so given then, there is that problem. But the point is that even if we accept that this world is a machine, we cannot prove that there is a God of the Christian sort who is a mechanic. Now, to prove that, Christians usually say this world is not like a standard machine. It's more like a grand machine. Look at the beauty, the grandeur, and the perfection in these things. It's a perfect machine. And to create a perfect effect, you need a perfect cause. You create a perfect, who has the perfection of the Christian God like that. Okay, if that's the reason, let's take a look at it. What's the problem with it? If we simply take a cursory look at this world, we know it's not all that perfect, not all that grand, not all that good. Lots of bad things happening, lots of things, don't happen together and all that. Certain gave the example of an ice cream. I wish I had want something here, See, it's not there. So things don't fit together. Of course, it's a silly example. What about all the warfare, all the misery and everything? During our one lifetime, over 1 billion kids will die for no reason.
That's right.
Out of preventable causes. Given that, how could you say it's a great, grand, perfect world, perfect machine, perfect design, so that we need to have a perfect designer for that? Okay, now, the Christians come back to respond now. Well, God did not try to make a perfect creation, perfect world. God wanted to make the best possible world. And it's better to have the best possible world than a perfect world. Why? God, with his infinite wisdom and power and goodness, could have made everything perfect, but that would be the most boring world. Not the sort of messy stuff that Satan talked about, that we'll err, and thereby we'll learn and grow morally. All that. It would not build our character. That's why God, out of his true goodness, gave us a world that allows us to make progress. Okay? So I'll just go maybe only for 5 minutes. I know my time is up, but I asked for some extra minutes, and I'll draw it to a close. Okay, now. But do you see the problem coming up with this sort of an explanation, this sort of a Christian defense? The Christians are trying to use God to prove God. So the argument is going in a circular way. You cannot bring in God to show that there is God. Where is God? Not yet. Until we get there, but we are bringing in God as a great being who, out of his kindness and wisdom, created the best possible world. The circular argument. But worse yet, it creates a huge problem that is so huge that I don't know if there is any solution to that, which is this, that this whole idea of this world being the best possible world, meaning some greater good will come out of it, that no facts will go against it, the idea that it's the best possible world because God has done it and God knows everything. It's unfalsifiable, it's unverifiable, it's vacuous. This claim is vacuous. It doesn't make any sense. Why? Suppose if we had less or a lot more evil in this world, that would still be the best possible world by definition. So anything we have, by definition, because of our dogmatic faith in God that we bring in when we should not be bringing in God, we say this is the best possible world. So when the claim is so vacuous, doesn't have any substance, because no facts can corroborate it, meaning the claim is unfalsifiable, then what happens? Then we have a problem. Now here comes the central issue here. It renders God's nature meaningless. We routinely say, well, trust God. God knows what he is doing. Don't try to judge God or try to understand God. If that be the case, how could we say God is all loving, God is all wise, God is all powerful and everything? If God is so mysterious, it cuts both ways. You can't have one way, leave the other way intact. So if we cannot even explain God, if God is indescribable, inscrutable, how could we in good conscience say that being that you can make sense of exists? Think about it. I'm using reason, logic, and common sense to make the point. We have to make sense of God first. Then we can say anything that makes sense. Then we can say, yes, there's a chance that thing might exist. But if you can't even make sense of it, how could you say with so much certainty that it exists? By faith? Well, faith in that case ends up being a dogma. What's a dogma? A dogma is a belief we hold on to regardless of facts. Regardless of facts. Let me give an example of a dogma. This patient had this strange idea that he was dead. Nothing will convince him that he was alive, perhaps not well, but alive. So the doctor, she thought she would try a little logic, little experimentation. She asked the patient, do dead people die? Do dead people bleed? The patient said, no, doctor, dead people don't bleed. Of course not. So the doctor just picked up a needle and pricked the patient's fingertip. Lo and behold, the patient started bleeding. So with a triumphant smile, the doctor asked, so, John, what do you say to that? John said, I'll be darned, doctor, dead people do bleed. So when the mind is made up like that, no logic, and the doctor uses a modus ponens logic that we all know in logic, that's not going to work, and mind is already made up, okay? Now, so then the question is, we get to see dogmatic faith. Now, is faith bad? I didn't say so. I, in fact, said that I would like to bring faith and reason closer together. Faith in God cannot be rational. Can it be reasonable? Perhaps, based on certain conditions. Look, to be reasonable, even if it's not rational, we have to see that it has some value in this life. That's where making sense of our mess in this life comes in. Our life is messy. If we can bring in God to make sense to us and bring in some fellow feelings, some love and all that, even though we know that we cannot prove God, what's wrong with that? That's wonderful. That's reasonable faith. It's not rational. Faith is not rational in that sense when it comes to God. It's reasonable faith. Okay? So, therefore, you see, faith can be brought in to show belief in God can have some consequence in our life, provided it's put to good use. But if in the name of God we start fight war and say, my God is better than yours, then that's a disaster, and that has happened so often. Okay, now you might say, but what good is that sort of a reasonable faith when we know for sure that God doesn't exist because it's irrational to say God exists, Well, we make a distinction between fantasy and illusion. A fantasy is a falsehood that we hold on willingly and knowingly because it adds to our life. It adds spice to our life, like this reasonable faith idea of God. An illusion is a falsehood that we don't know that it's false, we hold on to it, and it usually hurts us. That's this blind faith. Okay, so fantasy is okay within limit. You might still say, but what good is that faith, fantasy, reasonable faith, if we really know in the bottom of our heart it's not true? I don't see any problem with that. 25th of December, we celebrate that as Christ's birthday. We all know he was not born, he was not born then. Maybe sometimes in late April or so, when it was snowing so much in Palestine, we need, of course, White Christmas, We know that. That's a falsehood we hold on to. But nonetheless, we make a celebration out of it. We celebrate together. We preach love, fellow feeling. That's a good thing about it, which is based on a falsehood. So that's one example. And example, well, kids believing in Santa Claus. Even kids themselves don't believe in Santa Claus. And yet, what a great thing it's not only for the kids, for the adults as well. Provided it's not that commercialized, It's so good. My point is this. If kids can believe in Santa Claus, why can't adults believe in their God? As simple as that. Exactly on that same parallel, okay? So that's why I had so many other things to cover. I'm running short of time, but maybe during the question answer, during the time when we ask each other questions, things will come up. So I do believe in honoring other people's faith, but they have to be reasonable. They cannot be unreasonable. I do believe that faith and reason can go together in the sense that it's rationally okay to believe in reasonable faith. They go together. That's how we can bring sides together. And that's why, yes, relativism, that's a no-no. Pluralism, definitely respect and embracing of other beliefs within reason and celebration, that's pluralism. So I could go on, but that's just the gist. I know I'm way past the allotted time. So we can get going, but I have a lot other things to do. I mean to say here, hopefully some of that will come up in our talk. Thank you.
Okay, that was excellent. Both speakers gave very interesting perspectives. So we're going to start the questioning of each other. So the first question, Satyan will ask of Dr. Chatterjee, and then we'll go back and do the opposite.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I just wanted to let you catch your breath. I know you just finished. So I guess when I was just listening to you talk, I know there are a lot of things I can ask and we could talk about, but I wanted to kind of bring it down to a very concrete level, to just an example. So here's some things that I struggle with, and I just wanted to know how you would handle the struggle. And I guess my struggle would be things I actually haven't had to deal with, but I'm thinking of situations of forgiveness and reconciling. You know, that's a big Christian. These are like big Christian words: to forgive one another, to reconcile. And you know, I look at South Africa as an example during the time of apartheid, and just very recently, when apartheid ended, the South African, the Afrikaners were forgiven in some sense and let go of hundreds and hundreds of years of brutality to the black South Africans. And I think if something happens to my kids or my wife or my family and students, how could I possibly forgive somebody if it's a brutal act, a rape, you know, some horrendous thing, and actually offer embrace to them? And my faith offers an answer to it in the sense that either Christ took it on himself and offers us forgiveness. He took justice and reconciled, and that gives the right for me to give that up. How do you embrace reconciliation with justice? That's my question. In a kind of a concrete setting, you know, really tough things that happen in the world or in your life.
Reconciling compassion and forgiveness with justice. That's the question. How do we bring the two sides together when horrible things had happened without being vengeful, without being reactive? How could we simply forgive, forget, embrace and love the other side and move forward? Great question. Now, in my role as a law professor and also as a philosopher, that's precisely is my research topic, and I'm still a humanist. Okay. I believe that there is room and there is need, there is time for forgiveness. And if we can reconcile that with justice, that is extremely fine. But also, justice by itself cannot be compromised. Keep that in mind. Justice is not revenge. Keep that in mind. Revenge is a no-no. Justice has its own demand. Wrongs has to be done right, should be acknowledged in the right way. There should be some retributive element in the process. We can compromise up to a point by saying that I don't care much about that. Let me embrace somebody who had done that horrible wrong to me. I go for that. If we go for that, belief in God may help. I'm not denying that. As I say, that's the idea of reasonable faith. Does that mean therefore God exists? That's my question. Humanists can believe in compassion, reconciliation, just as much as anybody else. Look at the Buddha, founder of Buddhism, known as the great compassionate soul. His idea of karuna that went beyond the Christian idea of agape, going beyond the human realm to the animal realm and all beings, that great compassion. Who was Buddha? He was born over 5,000-6,000 years before Jesus. He didn't believe in any God. He gave us that wonderful philosophy, moral philosophy of compassion. Look at the Jains. They're the most compassionate, most non-violent religious folks in the world. They don't have any place for God. So therefore, I'm not understanding the question. I'm not saying that Christians cannot have compassion. Of course they do, just as anybody else. Does that prove that God exists? Give me some reason, then I will believe it. So, can I ask you this question, Satyan?
Yes, please.
This belief in heaven and hell, okay?
Mm-hmm.
To ask you this question, I have to preempt that with one or two comments. That's a standard Christian staple, which is that, well, good people have certain things waiting for them, bad people something else, and therefore it's better to be moral and spiritual than do the right thing than take chances. Now, this idea of playing poker with our life chances, that's not the way to be moral. And besides, when facts themselves are not clear, namely whether God exists or not, all bets are off. Given that, what do we do with this idea of heaven and hell? About the idea of hell, I understand it a little bit. What hell would be like. An awfully bad place. Everybody's burning in hell. They're crying. Awfully bad thing, because we know what misery means. We experience that a lot. We can mean that a lot. But what about heaven? I would like to ask Satyan this question. If you can clarify that issue. This idea of eternal bliss, eternal nice something, I cannot think of anything more blissful than with my wife Donna and with my dog Snoopy, okay?
Yes.
Now,
that's right.
Can Snoopy be allowed to go to heaven? That's one question. Secondly, Donna is a Buddhist. She doesn't believe in God. If she doesn't go to heaven, I don't want to go to heaven. I cannot think of what sort of uncertainty I will get into not knowing when I have something so blissful here. If we say, no, Donna can get to heaven too because she's a good and moral person, provided she is, and she is, I know that, then I rest my case. That means then we don't need God. We don't need a certain way, Christian way to get to heaven or hell. So this is my question then. Sorry, finally my question.
Wait, was that your question? Or?
My question.
Oh, okay.
In our finite life,
okay.
When we do finite evil or finite good things, why should our punishment be infinite? Why should our reward be infinite? There's no balance. So how can we make sense of heaven and hell unless it's a dogma, an unthinking way to think about it? That's my question.
Wow. Okay. Gosh. Okay. I'm going to give you the Christian perspective, or what I think is the Christian perspective, right?
But give me a rational perspective.
I'll do my best.
Please, right? Because that's why we're here.
Right. So, to me, the Christian faith is based very much on the way the Jews, the Hebrew mind works. To think of heaven as a place where dogs can't go, as a place where there's no ice cream. Dude, I don't want to be in a place there's no ice cream. To think of heaven as a place of some existential place where spirits float around and we play harps, that is a very Greek Gnostic notion of splitting the body and the mind. A Hebrew would never think this way. To a Hebrew, the thing that is awesome is what's in this world, right? The ice cream is awesome. The friendship is awesome. Marriage, dogs, trees, math. It's awesome. To me, a heaven is literally, if I died, my belief would say, I go to heaven, meaning it's a bus stop. It's a layover. The point is not to go to the bus stop or the layover. The point is to go to the new earth, where the world is redeemed, where everything is brought true, where pain and suffering are put down, where the perfect, what it was meant to be, is redeemed once again. Math is something enjoyable. Can you imagine that? Work is something that's fantastic, right? And you can actually go to work, and I know those of you who work, whether it's school or whether outside, you know that there's a part of that you actually enjoy. I know that. There's fellowship, there's friendship, there's actually, even when I wash the dishes, it's good, You can sit back in half an hour and go, dang, I actually did something useful, right? There's that redemption of something good. And that part is saved, but the part that's crushing about work, that injustice is removed. So to me, the concept of heaven is meaningless. It's a Hebrew point of redemption of the world. So that's the answer to one part of your question.
But we're taking then heaven and hell in a metaphorical sense, not in a literal sense. Is that the direction I'm getting from you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
We're taking heaven and hell, those two concepts, in a metaphorical way.
No, I mean in a very...
in a literal way.
No, I mean in a very physical way. Like, this is what's going to be in heaven, not an disembodied...
Heaven after you die? Or right now?
So, the Christian faith would say the following thing. Let's pretend I drop dead right now. Okay? As an example. Then even Paul struggles with like trying to explain what the heck he said. It's like your spirit or something is kind of held in a spot when at the end of the world, the entire world is redeemed. And at that time, the layover is over and the party begins. The world is redeemed. And at the end in Revelation, it talks about a new Jerusalem. The spiritual world and the physical world are brought together. We get to hang out with God. I mean, it's like an amazing experience. God is, to actually see. And every day, I'm learning new math. Whoa, sweetness. And I'm tasting new ice cream. The next day, strawberry chip with almonds. Strawberry chip with chocolate and almonds. Holy smoke, right? It's like, that's heaven. It's not that you get everything in one shot and you're done. It's a physical world that has been redeemed and the spiritual is with it together. That is a Hebrew notion of what the new earth is.
No, I understand the Hebrew notion. I know the Christian notion, in fact, a lot. I'm the first one on this campus who started a huge class this size on God. I'm the first one on this campus, 30, 40 years ago, started a course on Jesus. No such courses were there. I'm the one who started a course on comparative religion so that we know all faiths and ideas. So I know those things, but what I wanted to find out
please.
Is the rational way to explain these things. If we take a step outside of Christianity and look at it to see if it makes sense to convince a person of reason, which is what we have going in life, to say why I have to believe in you.
I see.
Suppose if I'm not a Christian, why should I believe in you?
I see.
That's the point.
That's it. So that's a great. So you're saying why even buy into this?
Right. That's
what you're trying to ask me.
Give me some reason.
Yeah.
Rational explanation.
If I'm living in this life, I agree with you 100% in a lot of things you said. Let me be clear about what I agree with. There's no way we can know God, right? There's no way we can test whether there's a God, because the weapons we have are tools of this earth, right? Our mind, our ideas, those are all weapons of this earth. How can we possibly measure something that's not of this earth using tools from the earth? So there's no way we can know God. I fully agree. So if you believe in God, then you're kind of making up stuff, right? You're like, there's no way to test him, so maybe I need this artificial construct to make my life work. I would much rather, as you're saying, not believe in Santa Claus, not teach my kids that stuff. Even if it makes them a little bit better, I'll say, dude, don't be an idiot, right? We never taught our kids Santa Claus, just to give you a heads up. I'd rather just be a clean atheist in that sense. I agree with you. The one thing that's convinced me is the only way that you would know if God exists is if God comes to the earth and proves evidence. That's the only way, right? We can't have artificial tools. And the only way that can happen is if there's historical data saying it happened. You can't have feelings because we all have different feelings. So to me, my whole basis is the fact that I believe that there is historical data of the evidence.
Let's talk about the historical data. Let's talk about them. All religions have their own historical data. The great thing about those non-historical religions, like Buddhism and other religions, they don't base their ideas on historical data. For them, even if the Buddha did not live, Buddhism doesn't go down the drain. But for Christians, if somebody could prove that Jesus never lived, it was a hoax, whole of Christianity goes down the drain. So on that side, with that sort of historical contingency, I don't want to base my life with our modern challenges today. So therefore, why should we believe in those historical data? What are they? And we know, of course, the controversy, how the others would be skeptical of those data, So tell us a bit about them. What are they?
So I'll just say this, and then maybe we can open it up to Q&As. There's no proof that this historical data is 100% true, right? Or else there's no need for faith. You just say, look, man, 1 + 1 is 2, game over, right? So is there proof that Abraham Lincoln really got killed? Maybe right before the bullet hit him. Zoom. Maybe. I mean, there's no evidence, right? But based on the tools we have today, the evidence we have about what happened about 150 years ago, we can say, yeah, I believe it as much as I could. So to me, if I look through the historical data of what happened in the Jewish faith, I am convinced. Now, I'm not 100% convinced. I struggle every day whether, am I really believing this stuff? Is this real? That question should come up. But I believe that what has actually happened makes sense from Scripture, just reading it as a work of literature, makes sense as a work of history. And the more I start trusting it, the more I start trusting my wife, The more I know that tomorrow when I go home, she might not stab me in the back. She might, but I've known her for 15 years and I've been married to her. So the chance that she wouldn't has increased, that she would actually love me and not actually kill me. So in that sense, the more I trust this data, the more I make sense of the reality around me. So.
I would say that's blind trust. We can trust on anything. The more we would like to trust something, we would like to put our mind to it, the more it ends up being real. Look, there are scores of data for Abraham Lincoln, no problem. I'm talking about the ancient times when people had primitive mind and what they said about historical data. You have to really let reason and common sense go out of your mind to believe in those things. On top of that, do you know how some of them are the most despicable, immoral things that they practiced in those days and all that in today's life? They would be our example with that little knowledge. And besides, how little we know of Jesus. Mark and Matthew, they talk about the only last 3 years of his life, his mature Christianity, his mission, ministry. And only Luke and John, they talk about his birth. And only Luke and John, they also talk about the fact that Jesus was born of a virgin. Why? By citing, we find that in Isaiah. Lo and behold, he was 8th century BCE Hebrew prophet. Lo and behold, a young woman, a virgin, would give birth to somebody who would be our Savior. His name would be Emmanuel. Okay? Now, do you know, Mark, in rendering that verse, that the Hebrew word, Alma, which in Hebrew Judaism always stands for a young woman, he changed that word into Greek, parthenos. That means a virgin. So those things happen, we know that. And yet our whole enterprise today is based on those iffy things. Who changed what word and what meaning we got out of that, what those primitive people believed in something, what they didn't, It's based on that. I'm not convinced. Give me something a bit more. That's all.
Okay. I think that this discussion could go on all night. So we're going to now take some questions from the audience. So the first question I have will be directed for both of you.
Okay.
So I'll ask Dr. Chatterjee to answer first, since he seems to have a lot of energy. So I'll start with...
I'm exhausted, so...
Okay,
something
start with
has
it. Okay, so both of you, the question...
I'm exhausted and exasperated.
Yeah.
Something, please. Answer that.
This question asks, why do people seem to know what is good but do bad?
Why do people seem to know? Why do I seem to know what is good? Oh, I certainly know what is good in many ways and do bad. Like, for example, not getting a gift for my wife on her birthday. You know what's good. I didn't do it, as an example. Or lots of things. Cutting off people in traffic might not be good. I mean, silly things, right? But those things, a lot of issues with cutting off people in traffic. I'm not sure if you've ever done that before. Especially if somebody cuts you off in traffic, you know what I'm talking about? I think it's our desire to be God. In other words, our desire to control the world around us, to say that I'm more important. So when Professor Chatterjee, when you were talking about morality is an equilibrium, a balance of, I think of it as a vector space, at some point in a vector space, but a balance of different concepts, and you want to, you have some averaging of something that's going on. That's great, but we all have different values and different points. And when I emphasize something more, it's very difficult to say that who's right and who's wrong. Because one could say, dude, in my moral system, I'm doing awesome. Right? As a CEO of a company, if I'm making $100 million and I have an employee who's making $7 an hour barely working, I'm not just making a little bit more, I'm making a ridiculous amount more. But the CEO could be paying taxes, could be doing everything by the books, could have started his company himself. Maybe she invested all her money, took the life savings, and made the company what it is. So in one moral case, you can say, whoa, wait a minute, leave the CEO alone. Morally, the CEO is just doing exactly what it wants. You can say, well, this is corruption. You're actually abusing your workers and standing on top of them to make 100,000 times more than what they're making. Is one human life worth more than others? So I think it's our desire to control things is what does this.
Carol, could you repeat that question again?
Yeah, sure. Why do people seem to know what is good but do bad?
Because so often people are ignorant, they don't even know themselves. So they believe in something that they think is okay, that's good. So they could be wrong-headed, they could be misguided. Lots of reasons we can give. These are all humanistic reasons. So no, we don't know everything, and yet we are so eager to do things right. So in the process, we end up doing messy stuff. So it could be as simple an answer like that, unless the questioner is asking for something deeper, but I don't know that.
All right, this question is for Satyan. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with contradictions in the Bible's reality?
Fantastic question. So let me just, if you guys don't know a contradiction, let me just give you one right off the bat. Genesis 1, crack open the book, right? It says, here's the way the world was made, blah, 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 trees, fish, man, number 6, sixth day, right? Man. So a bunch of things happened and then man was made. Genesis 2, flip to the next chapter. It goes, well, man was made, and then God made all these other things for man. Now, they didn't hide Genesis 2 like in Habakkuk 4 or some weird chapter of the book. It's like, oh, they'll never find this other one. Why would they put it right? I mean, it's like, dude, do you not read it linearly? It's like, okay, man was number 6. Man was number 1. What the heck? If I was a mathematician, oh, wait, I am, I would throw it out. But here's the catch, right? And this is sort of a counterpoint to some of the things you're saying about Mary and being a virgin. You cannot use the tools of how we read things today as enlightened people, as how we measure data and how we read history, as somebody who had an oral tradition at that time and who valued things extremely differently. So let me tell you one way of reading Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1 is the following thing. It's sort of probably what happened in the way the world was created. Evolutionary-wise, I don't care how you put it. But somehow, first this, then the sun, and then eventually man was king. Genesis 2 goes, in case you're wondering if you think man is an afterthought, let me be really clear. Man was made first in the eyes of God, and everything else was made around him. So for somebody who's a Hebrew reading at that time in an oral tradition, it was never even a contradiction. They read it and they go, there's nothing wrong here. I fully understand what's going on. It is built into the way they read it. We as scientific people read it and go, this is trash. So a lot of the contradictions, there are some, and they are messy because you're dealing with history. Even if you read the 4 Gospels, things don't click all the way. Wait, how many people were at the tomb? Who witnessed the resurrection of Christ? Where? What? And it's not, I understand that. That is certainly true. But 95% of the time, it's all clicking. And it's all clicking about the big things. The little things don't work. But you have to read it in the way the text was written. If it's poetry, don't read it like a newspaper. Right? It's just meant as poetry. And if it's written prophetically, it's written in a different style. We don't have prophetic styles today, but they did. So you have to read it in context.
Can I respond to that question?
I suppose.
I agree with Satan. Contradictions in the Bible, or for that matter in all great religious texts, they don't bother me that much. It's the silliness of the ideas, and it's the despicable values that we find in them so often. That bothers me. Look at the Genesis that Satan mentioned. Wow, women are, I don't need to go too far to know what they thought about women, what they had all those ideas, the silliness of ideas. God created fig leaf for Adam. Wow, if that be the case, maybe God created banana leaf for me. Sorry. It just came out, didn't mean it. Okay, but this silliness of ideas, silly ideas, and the values that comes across. But again, those were ancient folks, sipped into polygamy, sipped into the idea of treating women as objects. We understand that. Are we going to live our life based on those values and those ideas? That's my point. Sorry.
Okay, this one is for Dean. What do you believe to be the origin of the reciprocity principle of morality, and how did morality become part of the human enterprise?
Okay, it's the question of the origin of morality, origin of the idea of reciprocity. Now, we find that idea of reciprocity in all religions. But religions are all created by humans, they are human enterprise. And also, if we take a psychological look at the origins, we can come up with one set of ideas. If we come up with sociological roots of morality, another set of ideas. Anthropological roots of morality, a different set of ideas. I can go in all different ways. But the point is that however it is, the whole teachings of morality is that we should not make an exception for ourselves and expecting others to follow the rule. That's the whole idea of reciprocity, that we should treat others with dignity, the same due dignity, treating them as persons, as ends, not as means, not as objects, as we would like to be treated ourselves. I don't care how we can explain the origin of that idea. We can give psychological, sociological, anthropological, all types of explanations. But that idea makes sense. Without that, I cannot think of morality. That's where this thing comes in. I don't need to look for a pie in the sky when I die to get ideas, you know. So that would be my response.
Okay. In the last couple of minutes, we're going to allow the speakers to make a closing statement. You have 2 minutes or less to make a closing statement. So
can we go first?
I'll let Dean go first this time.
Okay. First, let me tell you again how honored I am to be here, and I'm elated to be with Satan, and I respect his Christianity, respect anybody's Christianity or any religion, within reason. And I came here for reason. That's the whole idea of this forum. I thought that we have to rationally show what makes sense, what does not. We simply don't need to repeat our belief, you know. That we have done enough of that. Okay, so I respect Satan's views, but let's get serious. Okay, so point is this. What I find, just in 1 minute I'll tell you this, this idea of explaining bad things in the world from the Christian perspective by saying that that's a soul-making exercise, that moral evil is where we have the freedom of the will so that we grow from that, and natural evil is the opportunity for us to build our character. Tell that to 1 billion kids, those who would be dead during our generation. Tell that to the victims of the Holocaust, and tell that, wow, that's for soul-making, don't you see that? Do you know how bad that sounds, you know? So I just can't take that. This idea of Christianity, this idea of bringing everything to the Bible and Jesus. How little we know of Jesus, I just mentioned. Only this little we know of Jesus, the last 3 years of his life, even then through hearsay. Do you know the 4 synoptic gospels were not put together not until 40 years after Jesus died, in those ancient primitive times, 40 years, and then build things up through hearsay, what he did, what he said. Do you know how risky that is? So everything has to be put to rational scrutiny as it makes sense right now. That's my belief. Does that mean I don't admire Shatwan? Wow, what a colorful, lively presentation he gave. I thoroughly enjoy that. We need Satan, for sure. But I thought we came here for something else. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's clear that Dean and I agree on a lot of things in terms of artificially having a construct for God just for the sake of morality is useless. I absolutely agree with you there. And we, on the other hand, disagree with a lot of things. I think Professor Chatterjee has maybe incorrect notions or maybe the Western notions of what Christianity is, which might be fine, that's sort of what people believe. But Christianity is a very Hebrew faith. So let me just close with a story. I think the story summarizes how I think in a lot of ways. There's a very famous theologian in the past 100 years, probably one of the greatest theologians at that time. If not, people say, one of the top 5 ever. His name is Karl Barth, great Christian theologian. He was coming out of church one day, and an astronomer, famous astronomer, comes out of church with him, and he goes, Karl, isn't it true that all of morality, all of religion, all the faiths can really be summarized in one sentence? Karl Barth, of course, who's a master theologian, he's written thousands of pages on this, because there's a sentence that summarizes not just all of the Christian faith, but all the faiths and all these ideas. What is a sentence? The astronomer goes, well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Isn't that just really the point of it? I mean, why even have this religious stuff, right? Why? Isn't that the core of it? Karl Barth thinks about this for a while, and he goes, can all of astronomy also be summarized in a sentence? And the astronomer goes, what are you talking about? You're talking about gravitational forces, weak forces, the way the atoms that started in the sun is now making us. You're talking about curvature of space and time. You're talking about quasars. All of this in a sentence. You're talking about all of astronomy in one sentence. What is a sentence? And he goes, twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are. And you see, when you take deep ideas that people have struggled with, and faith across the board, that people are trying to understand that morality is something bigger than us. And even Dean agreed with this thing, that it's not just science, there's something more to it. And you trivialize it to something like, well, it's just something like do unto others. You've robbed it of something. I encourage you again, think deeply about these things. Thank you, guys.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.